Salachi, Unihuli Yakni Sakya Elana Picha, Chichenjis Uchi Chenjis Anu, Chenjis Talwa, Chenjis Tana, Akapa, Yati Yamasi Fisa.
Welcome, dear viewers. Today we're diving deep into the heart of Yamasi Indian Land, a federal trust area brimming with hidden stories, resilience, and heritage. Join us as we uncover the untold tales of this sacred land and its people, weaving through history's intricate tapestry. Let's embark on this adventure together and discover the richness of Indigenous culture. So grab your curiosity and come along for an unforgettable journey. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you can join our tribe and ring that notification bell to stay up to date.
In this documentary, we want to explore the intricate historical, legal, and cultural dimensions surrounding Yamasee land. Tracing the origins of the Yamasee people, their interactions with colonial powers, and the subsequent dispossession of their lands, this documentary delves into the complexities of sovereignty, territorial rights, and the enduring struggles for acknowledgement and restitution. Drawing upon archival sources, legal documents, and scholarly analysis, we aim to provide a comprehensive understanding of the Yamasee's land and its significance in the broader context of Indigenous rights and justice. The history of Indigenous peoples in the Americas is marked by a legacy of dispossession, displacement, and marginalization. Among the myriad Indigenous nations that inhabited the vast landscapes of North America and South America, the Yamasee people stand as a testament to resilience and resistance in the face of colonial expansion and settler colonialism. This documentary seeks to illuminate the historical and contemporary significance of Yamasee land, shedding light on the complex web of factors that have shaped our land tenure, sovereignty, and identity. The origins of the Yamasee people can be traced back to the pre-Columbian era, when we inhabited the southeastern region of what is now the United States. Belonging to the Muskogean linguistic group, though our language derives from Itsamaya, the Yamasee were part of a broader network of indigenous societies characterized by complex social structures, political alliances, and cultural practices. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Yamasee maintained settlements along the coastlines and river valleys, engaging in agriculture, hunting, and trade. In the book, Sketch of the Seminole War and Sketches During a Campaign, by a lieutenant of the Left Wing, published by Dan J. Dowling, on page 25, East Florida was the original possession of the ancient Yamasee, who also owned a portion of Carolina, and the fierce and warlike spirit of that powerful tribe seems to have sprung up from their graves to animate the souls of their conquerors. Some few drops of their blood yet exist in the veins of the Seminoles, and the language of the latter has borrowed many of their words. Now let's take a moment to explain. The author notes that Florida was originally inhabited by the ancient Yamasee. If we look at the etymology of the word ancient, it derives from late 14th century ancien of persons, very old, from the 1400s of things, having lasted from a remote period, from Old French ancien, meaning old, long-standing ancient, from vulgar Latin *antianus, literally, from before. From the early 15th century, as existing or occurring in times long past, specifically in history, belonging to the period before the fall of the Western Roman Empire, from the 1600s, contrasted with medieval and modern. In English law, from before the Norman conquest. To continue, the Yamasee also owned a large portion of the Carolinas. Additionally, the author points out that the blood of the Yamasee still exists in the veins of the Seminoles, and the Seminole language has borrowed words from the Yamasee language. Despite the abundance of evidence presented, there remains a segment of individuals who steadfastly refuse to acknowledge, perceive, or comprehend the veracity that Indigenous American Indians historically and presently exhibit dark skin and are melanated people who some say favor the African people, though we have no connection to them. We will discuss briefly while staying within the topic, also bearing in mind the definition of ancient, and that the Yamasee are an ancient people and tribe with an ancient heritage and history. This assertion can be readily substantiated by referring back to the text, Sketch of the Seminole War and Sketches During a Campaign, by a lieutenant of the Left Wing, on page 26. Simmons, in his Notes of Florida, says, "The Ocklawaha tribe of Seminoles are thought to be descendants of the Yamasee, as they are blacker than the other tribes, and the Yamasee are said to have been remarkably dark-complexioned. King Payne, the grandfather of Micanopy, the present governor, married his Yamasee slave, and his son, Chief Payne, uncle to Micanopy, bore strong marks of his dark descent." Now let's take a moment to explain. Please keep in mind that this account is based on direct observation. The individuals providing these descriptions encountered and interacted with the people mentioned. To proceed, the Yamasee tribe is thought to be the ancestors of the Ocklawaha tribe of Seminoles, known for their darker complexion. The author cites examples of two men, such as King Payne and Chief Payne, who themselves have had Yamasee ancestry, emphasizing their darker complexion as evidence. His statement regarding Chief Payne, indicating that he bore strong marks of his dark descent, again bore strong marks. Marks, plural, meaning more than one, which pertains not only to his complexion, but also encompasses his facial features. The arrival of European explorers and colonizers in the 16th century marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Yamasee people, reshaping their social, political, and economic landscape in profound ways. As Spanish, French, and English expeditions ventured into the southeastern region of North America, the Yamasee found themselves thrust into a tumultuous era of contact and conflict. Initially, these encounters brought about disruptions to the traditional lifeways and patterns of governance that had sustained Yamasee communities for generations. European explorers, driven by a quest for wealth and power, sought to establish trade networks, exploit natural resources, and expand colonial territories. The Yamasee were forced to navigate shifting alliances and power dynamics as European powers vied for control over the lucrative resources of the southeastern region. Some Yamasee communities forged alliances with European colonizers in hopes of gaining protection or securing advantageous trade relationships. Others chose to resist foreign encroachment, clinging to their ancestral lands and asserting their sovereignty in the face of external pressures. As European colonization intensified, the Yamasee were confronted with mounting threats to their autonomy, territorial integrity, and cultural survival. European settlers encroached upon Yamasee lands, displacing indigenous communities, exploiting natural resources, and imposing foreign systems of governance. Treaties and agreements negotiated between colonial authorities and indigenous leaders often proved to be one-sided and exploitative, resulting in the loss of land, resources, and political autonomy for the Yamasee people. Throughout this tumultuous period, the Yamasee demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability in the face of adversity. They navigated the complexities of colonialism with pragmatism and strategic foresight, seeking to safeguard their interests while preserving their cultural heritage and way of life. Despite the challenges posed by European colonization, the Yamasee continued to assert their sovereignty, defend their ancestral lands, and resist assimilation into the colonial order. The encounters with European colonizers ushered in a new chapter in the history of the Yamasee people, marked by disruptions, conflicts, and transformations. As European powers vied for control over the southeastern region, the Yamasee were forced to navigate a complex terrain of shifting alliances and power dynamics, confronting existential threats to their autonomy and cultural survival. Yet, amidst the upheaval, the Yamasee persevered, drawing upon their resilience, adaptability, and sense of collective identity to confront the challenges of colonialism and assert their rights as indigenous peoples. Now returning to the book Sketch of the Seminole War and Sketches During a Campaign by a Lieutenant of the Left Wing on page 155. We passed on the side of the road a large tumulus or Indian mound of an oblong, roof-like shape. It seemed to be very ancient, as pines of considerable size were growing on the top of it. I wished to examine it more minutely, but there was no opportunity of stopping. I concluded that it was most probably a burial ground of the Yamasee who, after many hard battles, were finally exterminated 100 years ago by the Seminoles. Now, let's take a moment to explain. The author states that the mound likely serves as a burial ground for the Yamasee people, whom he thought were exterminated by the Seminoles approximately a century ago following numerous conflicts. However, it should be noted that this assertion is inaccurate, as the Yamasee people persist to the present day. The mention of the Yamasee's connection to the mound adds a historical and cultural layer to the narrative. It also reflects on the historical and cultural significance of these mounds, showing the Yamasees had ancient civilizations and their ancient burial practices. To continue, we will take a look into the U.S. Government Report of Industrial Commission on Agriculture and Agricultural Labor, Volume 10, Washington Government Printing Office, 1901. When mentioning the Yamasee of Beaufort, South Carolina in 1901, it states, "A most peculiar thing is this: Quarterages, in his book on the human race, asserts the fact that the African lived on these islands long before the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. He is high authority, and he says that the Yamasee Indians were Negroes, what were known afterwards as the fiercest of the Indian tribes of the South. The well-known Yamasee Indians were Africans. Is it a fact that they were much darker than the other Indians? Yes, it is a fact, and the hair was different too. So it is stated by one of the most distinguished ethnologists in the world." Another corroborative proof is that the Spaniards found that one Negro was equal to 10 Indians for work, and therefore imported these Indian Negroes and carried them to the West Indies to experiment with. Now, let's take a moment to explain. This document bears significance as an official government record, though it incorrectly identifies the Yamasee as Africans based solely on the darkness of their skin, whether deliberate or accidental. It's worth noting that Christopher Columbus referred to them as Negro Indians, signifying the darkness of their complexion. Furthermore, this record confirms the Yamasee's existence as late as 1901. Moreover, it disproves the previous author's suggestion of their extermination. Meanwhile, the previous author substantiates the ancient presence of the Yamasee people, proving their ancient existence in the Americas. It's noteworthy to mention that Christopher Columbus did not reach North America. Instead, he arrived in South America. He was the first European to arrive in the Bahamas, then the island later named Hispaniola, now split into Haiti and the Dominican Republic. On his subsequent voyages, he went farther south to Central and South America. The fact that he encountered the Yamasee also supports the evidence that the Yamasee inhabited South America as well as North America.
Niku Yamase yate. Yate unke hechite. But I'm pretty sure you all prefer English. Good, I can speak English. Have you heard of my people before? Yes. I am Chief C. Ku Hajo of the Yamasi Indian tribe and people, the fiercest of Indian warriors and tribal people. My people are the Yamasee, and we helped the Spanish and the British. We went to war for them. We hunted for them. We taught them how to farm, how to survive. And in return, they gave us diseases and slavery. Enslaving our women, children, and elders. All because of the color of our skin. See, the Yamasee people were dark-skinned people. We looked like the Negroes from Africa they was bringing over. It was cheaper for those who could not afford to rent ships or had ships in their possession to put a Yamasee into slavery than it was for them to send for Africans or buy Africans that came from the slave ship. But not only did they put us in slavery, they took our women and children and put them into slavery, torturing our children and women, beating them with sticks with thorns, whips, taking our newborn babies, putting ropes around their necks, sitting them next to creeks, rivers, and banks to use as alligator bait. They were savages. They were cruel. But they called us savages. We was forced to fight, forced to go to war, to find freedom. The people we once called allies, friends, now became our enemies. The Spanish, they weren't much better, but they gave us land in La Florida for us to have freedom. So, we raided the slave plantations at night, following the stars, taking groups much this size and sometimes smaller, women, children, and elders, babies, to find freedom. Trekking through the forests, swamps, and inside these swamps, there was Nkusi, bears, Kui, panthers, Chito, snakes, Kui, dangerous things, animals, only hunting to survive. And we were their targets. But much worse than the animals, because we understood the land. was those they sent after what they now called their property. Those that we once taught how to hunt our land, how to track, are now tracking us, using what we taught them about this land. No longer called hunters or our friends or trackers, they're now called slave catchers. Slave catchers sent to return the property of those who kidnapped my people. To grab my people and put them back into slavery. To torture our children, our women, our babies. It was not an option for my people. Mothers, fathers, we live for and will die for our children, will we not?
The establishment of colonial outposts and the influx of European settlers marked a turning point in the history of the Yamasee people, triggering a cascade of events that fundamentally altered the social, economic, and political landscape of their ancestral territories. As European colonies expanded across the southeastern region of North America, the Yamasee found themselves confronted with a relentless onslaught of territorial encroachment and dispossession. Colonial authorities, driven by a relentless pursuit of land and resources, imposed a series of treaties, agreements, and land cessions that systematically eroded the territorial integrity of Yamasee lands. These agreements, often negotiated under duress or through coercion, resulted in the forced relinquishment of vast tracts of ancestral territory, undermining the sovereignty and autonomy of Yamasee communities. The consequences of these land seizures were devastating for the Yamasee people, leading to widespread displacement, loss of traditional territories, and disintegration of communal lifeways. Families were uprooted from their ancestral homelands, torn apart by the inexorable march of colonial expansion. Yamasee communities, once thriving centers of culture and tradition, were scattered and fragmented, their social fabric torn asunder by the forces of colonization. Moreover, the Yamasee were subjected to systemic violence, coercion, and deceit in their interactions with colonial officials, further exacerbating their marginalization and vulnerability. European settlers, emboldened by notions of racial superiority and entitlement, routinely perpetrated acts of aggression and dispossession against Yamasee communities, resorting to intimidation, force, and subterfuge to advance their colonial agenda. Legal frameworks and land tenure represent critical aspects of indigenous rights and sovereignty, yet they have often been fraught with complexities, contradictions, and injustices. For indigenous peoples, including the Yamasee, the relationship with land is deeply intertwined with cultural identity and traditional practices. However, the imposition of colonial legal systems and land tenure systems has frequently undermined indigenous land rights and autonomy. Colonial legal frameworks, established by European powers and later adopted by settler governments, have historically prioritized the interests of colonial settlers and corporations over those of indigenous peoples. Treaties, acts of Congress, and judicial decisions have often been used as tools of dispossession, facilitating the transfer of indigenous lands to non-indigenous entities through coercive means or fraudulent practices. Furthermore, the concept of land tenure has been shaped by colonial notions of property rights and ownership, which often conflict with indigenous conceptions of land stewardship and collective ownership. Indigenous land tenure systems based on communal ownership and reciprocal relationships with the land have been disregarded or marginalized within the framework of colonial law, leading to conflicts over land use, resource extraction, and jurisdictional authority. In recent decades, indigenous peoples, including the Yamasee, have increasingly sought to assert their rights to land and self-determination through legal means, advocating for the recognition of indigenous land titles, the enforcement of treaty rights, and the protection of sacred sites. Challenges persist in achieving true justice and equity in land tenure and legal frameworks. Structural inequalities, institutionalized racism, and ongoing colonization continue to impede indigenous efforts to reclaim and protect their ancestral lands. Moreover, the legacy of colonialism, including historical trauma and environmental degradation, further complicates the struggle for indigenous land rights and sovereignty. The intersection of legal frameworks and land tenure represents a battleground for indigenous rights and sovereignty, where the forces of colonialism and indigenous resistance collide. By interrogating and challenging colonial legal systems, indigenous peoples, including the Yamasee, seek to reclaim their rightful place as stewards of their ancestral lands and forge a future grounded in justice, equity, and respect for indigenous sovereignty. Now let's take a look at American Indian Law Review, Volume 15, Number 2, January 1st, 1991. Florida's Seminole Indian Land Claims Agreement, Vehicle for an Innovative Water Rights Compact, by Barbara S. Monahan, on page 344, where it mentions, however, when the water permitting system was implemented, the Board of Conservation failed to take into account the water requirements of the Indian reservations located within the state, thereby depriving the Seminole Indian tribe of sufficient water to economically develop the agricultural aspects of its reservations. Water is vital to the Seminoles since the tribe derives almost 40% of its income from farming and forestry. In early 1986, it became obvious that the Seminoles would have to take action to obtain a fair share of the water available in South Florida, or face virtual destruction of their land and livelihood. This note will first review the historical events leading to the negotiation of the settlement, which embodies the compact. This note will also discuss settlement of Seminole land claims and briefly summarize the principles of Indian water rights to lay the groundwork for a discussion of the compact. This note will then address the trade-offs and concessions made by the parties to effectuate the terms of the settlement and to quantify water rights for the Seminole Indian tribe. Finally, this note will draw some preliminary conclusions about the utility of the settlement as a model for future water rights agreements. The Seminole Indians were originally members of the Yamasi Indian tribe, which was driven to Florida from the Carolinas in 1715. Tribal numbers increased when members of the Creek Indian tribe, who fled Georgia after the Creek War, joined their ranks. Tribal numbers were also increased by fugitive slaves who sought refuge among the Indians. After Florida was annexed by the United States in 1821, numerous attempts were made by settlers to the area to remove or annihilate the Indians. The settlers wanted the fertile lands located in north-central Florida, which were occupied by the Seminoles. The settlers were also afraid that their slaves would escape and find shelter with the tribe. Finally, in 1834, a portion of the tribe was transported to Oklahoma, where they formed one of the 5 civilized tribes. A few hundred Seminoles escaped to the Everglades in South Florida, as the main portion of the tribe was either escorted or dragged off to the west in what has been described as a brutal and debilitating march. White settlers continued to pressure the government to force the remaining Seminoles to migrate to the west, and although many attempts were made to do so, the tribe continued to live in various locations throughout South Florida. Footnotes 29. There was ill feeling among the white settlers and the Indians. Seminole country was constantly being invaded by bands of slave catchers, causing much unrest among tribal members. American forces were sent to Florida to deal with the Indians, which instigated the commencement of the First Seminole Indian War, 1817-18. Florida's Seminoles, Supra Note 1 at 12-13-30. Confederation of American Indians, Supra Note 25 at 379. Andrew Jackson, the first American governor of Florida, was extremely impatient with Indians who stood in the way of white settlement. Most of the tribes of the Southeast had been exterminated or sent to reservations in the West, and Jackson urged that the same course be followed with the Seminoles. Florida's Seminoles, Supra Note 1 at 15. Now let's take a moment to explain. The passage from the American Indian Law Review by Barbara S. Monahan provides a comprehensive analysis of the Seminole Indian Land Claims Agreement in Florida, with a specific focus on the intricate matter of water rights. Let's delve deeper into the key points outlined in the excerpt. First, water rights and economic development. Monahan underscores a critical issue concerning the implementation of the water permitting system by the Board of Conservation. Despite its importance to the Seminole tribe's economic activities, particularly farming and forestry, which contribute significantly to their income, the system failed to account for the water requirements of Indian reservations within the state. This oversight directly impacted the tribe's ability to economically develop their reservations, posing a substantial threat to their livelihood. Second, urgency and action. The situation reached a tipping point in early 1986 when it became apparent that the Seminoles had to take proactive measures to secure a fair share of the available water in South Florida. Without adequate water allocation, their land and economic viability faced imminent peril. This urgency spurred the tribe into action, leading to negotiations aimed at rectifying the water rights imbalance. Third, historical context. Monahan provides a detailed historical backdrop to contextualize the Seminole tribe's struggle for land and water rights. The Seminoles' origins trace back to the Yamasi Indian tribe in 1715, with subsequent additions from the Creek tribe and so-called fugitive slaves who were largely Yamasee and Seminole Indians. Despite attempts by settlers to remove or exterminate them, the Seminoles persisted, with a portion forcibly relocated to Oklahoma in 1834. However, some Seminoles sought refuge in South Florida's Everglades, resisting further displacement. Fourth, conflict and resilience. Throughout their history, the Seminoles faced persistent conflicts with white settlers and government forces. These tensions culminated in the First Seminole Indian War, 1817 to 1818, and continued pressure for removal to the west, advocated by figures like Andrew Jackson. Despite these challenges, the Seminoles demonstrated remarkable resilience, maintaining their presence in South Florida and resisting further forced relocation. Fifth, legal and negotiation processes. Monahan's analysis extends to the legal and negotiation processes surrounding the Seminole Land Claims Agreement. By outlining the principles of Indian water rights and summarizing the settlement of Seminole land claims, the article lays the groundwork for understanding the complexities of the compact. It delves into the trade-offs and concessions made by all parties to ensure equitable water rights for the Seminole tribe. Monahan's examination offers a nuanced understanding of the historical, legal, and socio-economic factors shaping the Seminole tribe's pursuit of water rights and sovereignty in Florida. It underscores the challenges faced by indigenous communities in navigating complex legal frameworks and advocating for their rights in the face of historical injustices and contemporary threats to their land and resources. Now let's take a look at the federal and state Indian reservations and Indian trust areas, U.S. Department of Commerce, Frederick B. Dent, Secretary. On page 474, Seminole Tribe, Seminole County, Oklahoma, Tribal Headquarters, Wewoka, Oklahoma, 74884 Federal Trust Area, Population 3,115, BIA 1172, Land Status, Tribally Owned, 320 acres, Allotted, 35,443 acres, Total Area, 35,763 acres. This land is held in trust by the United States under the Act of July 26, 1936. History. The people who came to be known as Seminole, the name means runaways, were a combination of Hitchiti-speaking Oconee, Yamasee, driven from the Carolinas, and Creek fleeing Georgia. Their ranks were swelled by fugitive slaves who found refuge and freedom among the Indians in Florida. In 1819, the territory of Florida was ceded to the United States by Spain. Pressure by white settlers for Seminole lands led to a government policy that favored removal of the Seminole to Oklahoma. Attempts to force removal between 1835 and 1843 produced resistance from many able Seminole leaders, the greatest of whom was Osceola. The United States succeeded in transporting most of the Seminole to Oklahoma in what amounted to a brutal, debilitating march. They were eventually granted a reservation of their own in the western part of the Creek Nation. Many government promises made to the Seminole were never fulfilled. There are a large number of Seminoles still in Florida. They are descendants of the 150 Seminole who escaped all removal efforts. They are located on 3 federal reservations at Hollywood, Brighton, and Big Cypress, Florida. Culture. The Seminole have some of the traditional ceremonials, dances, and ball games as well as their language. However, most of the original crafts and skills still known by the Seminole of Florida have been lost. Government. The Seminole tribe is governed by a general council consisting of 42 members. Now let's take a moment to explain federal and state Indian reservations and Indian trust areas. U.S. Department of Commerce, Frederick B. Dent, Secretary. This introductory statement indicates that the information provided is sourced from the U.S. Department of Commerce under the leadership of Secretary Frederick B. Dent. It sets the context for the following details about the Seminole tribe. Location and population. The Seminole tribe's tribal headquarters is situated in Wewoka, Oklahoma, 74884. The population within their federal trust area is reported as 3,115 individuals, as documented by the Bureau of Indian Affairs in November 1972. The land status of the Seminole tribe's territory is delineated. They own 320 acres outright, while an additional 35,443 acres are allotted to them. This brings the total area under their jurisdiction to 35,763 acres. It's emphasized that all this land is held in trust by the United States government, as mandated by the Act of July 26, 1936. The narrative provides insights into the origins and historical journey of the Seminole people. Originating as a combination of Hitchiti-speaking Oconee, Yamasee from the Carolinas, and Creek individuals fleeing Georgia, the Seminole population grew with the addition of fugitive slaves seeking refuge in Florida. The forced relocation of the Seminole to Oklahoma, prompted by pressure from white settlers for their lands, is highlighted. Despite resistance, most of the Seminoles were transported to Oklahoma in a grueling march. However, many government promises made to them were left unfulfilled. Additionally, it's noted that a significant number of Seminole descendants remain in Florida, concentrated in 3 federal reservations at Hollywood, Brighton, and Big Cypress. The Seminole tribe's cultural practices are briefly touched upon, including traditional ceremonies, dances, ball games, and language. It's mentioned that while some cultural traditions have been preserved, many original crafts and skills have been lost over time. The Seminole tribe's governance structure is outlined, indicating that they are governed by a general council consisting of 42 members. This detailed account offers a comprehensive understanding of the Seminole tribe's history, land ownership, cultural practices, and governmental organization, providing valuable insights into their identity and historical trajectory as a sovereign indigenous community. In conclusion, the narrative of the Yamasee tribe's journey resonates as a testament to resilience, defiance, and the enduring struggle for sovereignty. From our ancestral lands in the Carolinas to the forced relocation to Oklahoma, the Yamasee people have weathered the storms of oppression and broken promises with unwavering fortitude. As we reflect on our history, we are confronted with the stark realities of colonization, displacement, and the relentless pursuit of our indigenous lands by settlers and governments alike. Yet, amidst adversity, the Yamasee cultural identity perseveres, serving as a beacon of strength and continuity. Our story serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring legacy of colonization and the ongoing battle for indigenous rights and self-determination. It challenges us to confront the injustices of the past and present, while also inspiring us to stand in solidarity with indigenous communities as we continue to assert our inherent rights to land, culture, and autonomy. In the face of adversity, the Yamasee tribe stands tall, a testament to the indomitable spirit of indigenous peoples everywhere. Our journey serves as a powerful reminder that the struggle for justice and sovereignty is not only a historical narrative but an ongoing reality that demands our attention, our action, and our unwavering support.
If you would like to express your encouragement towards these works and content, please go to paypal.me/sunoyi-wahya-yt, or you can even directly contribute through Cash App at $sunoyi-wahya. Any amount you give will be immensely appreciated. Thank you for your generosity.